A woman in a simple dress was told to eat her meal in the kitchen while everyone else dined in the grand ballroom. Little did they know, her husband owned the entire hotel chain, and what happened next changed everything. This is Sarah's story, and it will leave you speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Martinez had always been the kind of woman who found beauty in simplicity. At 32, she possessed an understated elegance that came not from designer clothes or expensive jewelry, but from the quiet confidence that radiated from within. Her dark hair was usually pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her wardrobe consisted mainly of comfortable dresses and sensible shoes. She worked as a librarian in downtown Phoenix, a job that perfectly suited her gentle nature and love for helping others discover new worlds through books. When she received the invitation to her childhood friend Emma's wedding reception, Sarah felt a genuine warmth in her heart. She and Emma had grown up in the same modest neighborhood, sharing dreams and secrets throughout their teenage years. Though life had taken them in different directions after high school, Sarah cherished the memories they had created together. The invitation was beautifully crafted, printed on expensive cardstock with gold embossing, indicating that Emma had indeed married into wealth as she had always hoped. Sarah carefully selected her outfit for the occasion. She chose a navy blue dress that she had purchased on sale at a department store 2 years prior. It was simple, but elegant, with a modest neckline and sleeves that reached her elbows. She paired it with her grandmother's pearl earrings and a small clutch purse that had seen better days but still served its purpose. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she felt confident and appropriate for the occasion. She wasn't trying to compete with anyone or make a statement. She simply wanted to celebrate her friend's happiness. The wedding reception was being held at the prestigious Grandview Hotel, a 5-star establishment that towered over the city skyline. As Sarah approached the imposing glass entrance, she couldn't help but feel slightly intimidated by the opulence surrounding her. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed to assist guests arriving in luxury vehicles, while a red carpet led to the marble-lined lobby. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over everything, and the sound of classical music drifted through the air. Sarah presented her invitation to the hostess at the reception desk, a tall blonde woman whose smile seemed practiced and hollow. The woman looked Sarah up and down with barely concealed disdain, her eyes lingering on Sarah's simple dress and worn shoes. After checking the guest list twice, she handed Sarah a small card with a table number and directions to the ballroom. As Sarah made her way through the hotel's corridors, she marveled at the artwork adorning the walls and the fresh flower arrangements that seemed to appear at every turn. The Grandview Hotel was indeed magnificent, with its soaring ceilings, marble floors, and attention to every luxurious detail. She felt grateful that Emma had included her in such a special celebration, even though she knew she would be one of the few guests from their humble beginnings. The ballroom doors were massive oak panels with brass handles that gleamed under the soft lighting. As Sarah approached, she could hear the gentle murmur of conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses from within. She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and prepared to enter what she imagined would be a beautiful celebration of love and friendship. However, when she presented her card to the maître d' at the ballroom entrance, his expression immediately changed. He was a stern-looking man in his 50s, with silver hair slicked back and a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He studied the card for a long moment, then looked at Sarah with an expression that made her stomach drop. "I'm sorry, miss," he said in a voice that carried no warmth whatsoever. "There seems to be some confusion. Your seating assignment indicates that you'll be dining in our auxiliary dining area this evening." He gestured toward a hallway that led away from the ballroom, his tone suggesting that this was not a request but a directive. Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. This is Emma Richardson's wedding reception, isn't it? I'm her friend from childhood, Sarah Martinez." She held up her invitation as if it might clarify the situation. The maitre d' barely glanced at the invitation. "Yes, I'm aware of the event. However, seating arrangements have been carefully planned, and you've been assigned to dine in our kitchen staff dining area. It's quieter there, and I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable." His words were polite on the surface, but there was an underlying current of condescension that made Sarah's heart sink. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah stood there for a moment, trying to process what was happening. She could see into the ballroom through the open doors, where guests in expensive evening wear mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, sipping champagne and enjoying elegant hors d'oeuvre. The women wore designer gowns that probably cost more than Sarah made in 6 months, while the men sported tailored tuxedos and watches that gleamed with precious metals. Everyone looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about high society events. "But I don't understand," Sarah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma invited me personally. We've been friends since we were children. Surely there's been some mistake." She felt tears beginning to well up in her eyes, but she fought to maintain her composure. The last thing she wanted was to cause a scene at her friend's wedding. The maitre d' sighed impatiently, as if dealing with Sarah was a significant inconvenience to his evening. "Miss, I don't make the seating arrangements. I simply follow the instructions I've been given. The kitchen dining area is through that hallway, second door on your left. Someone will bring your meal there shortly." He turned away from her dismissively, already focusing his attention on the next guests approaching the ballroom entrance. Sarah felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She watched as other guests walked past her into the ballroom without any questions or complications. A couple in matching designer outfits laughed as they entered, the woman's diamond necklace catching the light as she moved. An elderly gentleman in an expensive suit nodded to the maitre d', who practically bowed in response. Everyone else seemed to belong here, while Sarah felt increasingly out of place and unwanted. With nowhere else to go and no desire to create further embarrassment, Sarah reluctantly followed the hallway toward the kitchen dining area. Her footsteps echoed softly on the marble floor, and she could hear the sounds of the kitchen growing louder as she approached. The contrast between the elegant ballroom and this utilitarian corridor was stark. Gone were the fresh flowers and artwork, replaced by plain walls and fluorescent lighting. The kitchen dining area turned out to be a small room adjacent to the main kitchen, with simple tables and chairs that were clearly meant for hotel staff during their break times. The walls were painted an institutional beige, and the only decoration was a bulletin board covered with work schedules and safety notices. The sound of clattering pots and pans from the nearby kitchen created a constant background noise that was a far cry from the gentle classical music playing in the ballroom. Sarah sat down at one of the empty tables, feeling more alone than she had in years. She could hear the distant sounds of laughter and celebration coming from the direction of the ballroom, but they seemed to belong to a different world entirely. She thought about Emma and wondered if her friend even knew what had happened. Had Emma specifically requested that Sarah be seated away from the other guests? Or was this the decision of someone else? As she waited in the sterile room, Sarah reflected on her friendship with Emma and how much had changed over the years. They had grown up in the same working-class neighborhood, where both their families struggled to make ends meet. They had shared dreams of better lives, but their paths had diverged significantly after high school. Emma had always been more ambitious, more willing to do whatever it took to climb the social ladder. She had married her first husband for his connections rather than love, and when that marriage ended in divorce, she had immediately begun searching for someone with even greater wealth and status. Sarah, on the other hand, had focused on building a meaningful life through her work and relationships. She found fulfillment in helping patrons at the library discover new books, in volunteering at the local animal shelter on weekends, and in the simple pleasures of reading by the window of her small apartment with a cup of tea. She had never sought wealth or status, believing that happiness came from within and from the connections we make with others. But sitting in that kitchen dining room, Sarah began to question whether her approach to life had been naive. Perhaps Emma had been right to prioritize financial security and social status. Perhaps Sarah's contentment with simplicity had been a mistake that left her vulnerable to exactly this kind of humiliation. She felt tears finally spilling down her cheeks as she contemplated how different her life might have been if she had made different choices. A young server appeared at the doorway, carrying a plate covered with a metal dome. She looked to be in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that provided the first warmth Sarah had experienced since arriving at the hotel. "Are you Sarah Martinez?" the server asked softly, and when Sarah nodded, she continued, "I have your dinner here. I'm so sorry about the seating arrangement." "This isn't right." The server, whose name tag identified her as Maria, set the plate down in front of Sarah with obvious sympathy. Under the dome was a beautifully prepared salmon with roasted vegetables, the same meal being served to the guests in the ballroom. At least they hadn't given her inferior food along with inferior seating, Sarah thought with bitter irony. "Thank you, Maria," Sarah said, managing a small smile despite her emotional state. "You're very kind." She appreciated that someone at least recognized the unfairness of the situation. Maria hesitated for a moment, as if wanting to say something more, but then hurried back to her duties in the main dining room. As Sarah ate her meal alone in the kitchen dining area, she could hear the sounds of the reception continuing without her. There were speeches and toasts, the clinking of glasses, and bursts of laughter that reminded her of all the joy she was missing. She imagined Emma in her beautiful wedding dress, surrounded by her new husband's wealthy friends and family, basking in the attention and luxury she had always craved. Sarah wondered if anyone in the ballroom had even noticed her absence. Had Emma asked where she was, or had she been too caught up in her special day to think about her childhood friend? The thought that Emma might not have even realized Sarah was missing made the situation even more painful. It suggested that their friendship had become so insignificant that Sarah's presence or absence was irrelevant. After finishing her meal, Sarah sat in the quiet room and made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of leaving the hotel immediately, as every instinct told her to do, she decided to stay and face whatever came next. She had done nothing wrong, and she refused to slink away in shame as if she had somehow deserved this treatment. She was a human being with dignity and worth, regardless of what her bank account might suggest. Sarah walked back toward the ballroom, her chin held high despite the emotional turmoil inside her. She could hear that the reception was in full swing, with music now playing for dancing. Through the open doors, she could see couples swaying on the dance floor, while others continued their conversations at elegantly decorated tables. The scene looked like something from a fairy tale, all sparkle and glamour and perfect moments. But as she approached the entrance again, the same maitre d' immediately intercepted her path. His expression was even more severe than before, and he positioned himself directly in front of her as if she were some kind of security threat. "Miss Martinez, I thought we had resolved this matter earlier. You were provided with dining accommodations appropriate to your situation." "Appropriate to my situation?" Sarah repeated, her voice growing stronger despite her nervousness. "And what situation is that exactly? I'm a guest at this wedding, invited by the bride herself. I have every right to be here just like everyone else." She held up her invitation again, but the maitre d' dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Miss, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Some guests have complained about your presence here, and we're trying to maintain the elegant atmosphere that our clientele expects. I'm sure you can understand that this is a very exclusive event, and we need to ensure that everyone feels comfortable." His words were like knives, each one designed to make Sarah feel smaller and more unwelcome. Sarah felt her anger rising, replacing some of the hurt and confusion she had been experiencing. "Complained about my presence? What exactly have I done wrong? I've been nothing but polite and respectful. I came here to celebrate my friend's wedding, not to cause problems for anyone." Her voice carried across the entrance area, and several guests turned to look at the commotion. The attention only seemed to make the maitre d' more determined to remove Sarah from the situation. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. We cannot have disruptions at our events, and your insistence on remaining here when you've been given alternative arrangements is creating exactly the kind of scene we work very hard to avoid." Sarah looked around at the faces watching them, some with curiosity, others with clear judgment. She saw Emma across the ballroom, resplendent in her white wedding gown, but Emma quickly looked away when their eyes met. In that moment, Sarah understood that her friend had indeed known about the seating arrangement and had approved it. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult from strangers could have. "I understand perfectly," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I understand exactly what kind of people I'm dealing with, and what kind of friend I thought I had." She looked one more time toward Emma, hoping for some sign of regret or recognition, but the bride had turned her back entirely. As Sarah prepared to leave, accepting that she had lost not only an evening but a friendship she had treasured for over 2 decades, she heard her phone buzzing in her clutch purse. She glanced at the screen and saw a text message that made her heart skip a beat. It was from her husband David, whom she had married just 6 months earlier in a simple ceremony at the courthouse, with only a few close friends as witnesses. The message read, "Just landed at the airport. My meeting's finished early and I wanted to surprise you at the wedding. Should I meet you at the Grandview Hotel? I have something special to show you tonight." Sarah stared at the message from David, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and anticipation. She had married this incredible man just 6 months ago, but their relationship had been so private, so removed from her old social circles, that none of her former friends knew the truth about her new life. David had been traveling extensively for business during the past month, and she had planned to attend Emma's wedding alone, never imagining she would need his support in such a devastating way. David Chen was not just successful, he was extraordinary in ways that few people could comprehend. At 38, he had built a business empire that spanned multiple industries. But he carried his wealth with such humility and grace that most people would never suspect his true financial status. Sarah had met him at the library where she worked, of all places. He had been researching historical documents for a philanthropic project, and their shared love of books and quiet conversations had sparked a connection that neither of them had expected. Their courtship had been beautifully unconventional. Instead of expensive restaurants and flashy displays of wealth, David had taken Sarah on picnics in hidden gardens, long walks through art museums, and quiet evenings spent reading together in bookshops. He had fallen in love with her mind, her kindness, and her genuine spirit. When he finally revealed the extent of his business holdings, Sarah had been shocked, but it had never changed the way she saw him or the way he treated her. Sarah quickly typed back a response to David's message. "Yes, please come to the Grandview Hotel. I need you more than you know. Something unexpected has happened, and I could really use your support right now." She hesitated before adding, "I love you," then pressed send and slipped her phone back into her purse. The maitre d' was still waiting for her to leave, his impatience growing more obvious by the minute. Several other hotel staff members had gathered nearby, clearly prepared to escort her out if necessary. The humiliation was complete, and Sarah felt the weight of every judgmental stare from the wedding guests who had witnessed her confrontation with the hotel staff. "Fine," Sarah said with quiet dignity. "I'll wait in the lobby for my husband to arrive. Then we'll both leave together." She turned away from the ballroom entrance, walking with her head held high despite the crushing disappointment and betrayal she felt. The whispers and stares followed her as she made her way back through the hotel's opulent corridors. The lobby of the Grandview Hotel was a masterpiece of luxury design, with its soaring ceilings, imported marble floors, and crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow patterns on the walls. Sarah found a quiet corner with 2 elegant chairs positioned near a massive window that overlooked the city skyline. She sat down and tried to collect her thoughts while she waited for David to arrive. As she sat there, Sarah reflected on the events of the evening and what they revealed about the people she had once considered friends. Emma's betrayal hurt more than the rudeness of the hotel staff, because it represented the loss of something Sarah had treasured for over 20 years. She thought about all the times they had supported each other through difficult moments, all the dreams they had shared, and all the promises they had made to remain friends no matter what life brought their way. But perhaps Emma had changed more than Sarah had realized. Perhaps the pursuit of wealth and status had transformed her into someone who valued appearances over genuine relationships. Sarah felt sad for her former friend, understanding that Emma had gained material comfort but had lost something far more precious in the process. True friendship, Sarah realized, was worth more than any amount of money or social standing. 20 minutes later, Sarah heard a familiar voice calling her name. She looked up to see David approaching with long, confident strides across the marble lobby. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that emphasized his tall, athletic frame, and his warm brown eyes were filled with concern as he reached her side. Even after 6 months of marriage, Sarah still felt her heart skip a beat when she saw him. "Sarah, what happened?" "You look upset," David said, immediately sitting down beside her and taking her hand in his. His presence brought an immediate sense of calm and security that Sarah hadn't realized she desperately needed. She had become so accustomed to facing life's challenges alone that having someone who truly cared about her welfare still felt like a wonderful miracle. Sarah told him everything that had happened, from the moment she arrived at the hotel until his text message had provided her with hope. David listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When she finished speaking, he was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had shared with him. "I'm so sorry you had to experience that," David said finally, his voice gentle but with an underlying current of controlled anger. "No one should ever be treated that way, especially not someone as kind and gracious as you. This reflects entirely on them, not on you. You did nothing wrong by attending your friend's wedding or by expecting to be treated with basic human respect." Sarah felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than humiliation. "I just can't believe Emma would allow something like this to happen. We were such good friends once. I thought our history meant something to her, but apparently I was wrong about a lot of things." David squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Sometimes people change in ways we don't expect, especially when they become focused on things that don't really matter in the long run. But that doesn't diminish who you are or what you bring to the world. Your kindness, intelligence, and genuine spirit are gifts that some people simply aren't capable of appreciating." As they sat together in the lobby, Sarah noticed that several hotel staff members were watching them with curious expressions. She wondered if they recognized David, though he had always been remarkably private about his business dealings and personal life. He preferred to work behind the scenes, supporting causes and helping people without seeking recognition or publicity. "There's something I need to tell you," David said, his voice taking on a different tone. "I wasn't entirely honest about why I came back early from my business trip. I received some concerning information about how you might be treated at this event, and I wanted to be here to support you if needed." Sarah looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean? How could you have known what would happen?" David smiled with a mixture of pride and mischief. "I own this hotel, Sarah. I own the entire Grandview hotel chain, actually. It's one of my smaller business holdings, but I've been keeping an eye on operations here because I've heard some troubling reports about discriminatory practices. What happened to you tonight was exactly the kind of behavior I've been working to eliminate." Sarah's mouth fell open in shock. She had known that David was successful in business, but she had never imagined that he owned the very hotel where she had been humiliated. "You own this place? But why didn't you tell me earlier? I wanted you to be able to enjoy your friend's wedding without feeling self-conscious about my business connections," David explained. "I thought you deserved to have that experience on your own terms. I never imagined that anyone would treat you with such disrespect, especially not in one of my own properties." Before Sarah could respond, David stood up and walked over to the hotel's front desk. She watched as he had a brief, intense conversation with the manager on duty, a conversation that resulted in the manager's face growing progressively more pale and alarmed. Within minutes, the manager was making phone calls and dispatching staff members in various directions throughout the hotel. David returned to Sarah's side with a satisfied expression. "I think we're about to see some significant changes in how this hotel operates," he said. "But first, I want to make sure you get the evening you deserve to have from the beginning." Within 10 minutes, the hotel's general manager appeared in the lobby, along with the maitre d', who had treated Sarah so poorly earlier. Both men approached with obvious anxiety, and the maitre d' looked as though he wished he could disappear entirely. "Mr. Chen," the general manager said, his voice carefully controlled, "I want to personally apologize for the completely unacceptable treatment your wife received this evening. This behavior does not reflect the values of the Grandview Hotel, and I assure you that immediate action will be taken to address this situation." David's expression remained stern as he addressed both men. "The treatment my wife received tonight was not just unacceptable, it was discriminatory and cruel. She was segregated from other guests based solely on her appearance and perceived social status, which violates both basic human decency and several anti-discrimination laws." The maitre d' tried to speak, but David held up a hand to stop him. "I don't want to hear excuses or justifications. I want to see meaningful changes that ensure no guest is ever treated this way again. My wife came here to celebrate her friend's wedding, and instead she was humiliated and made to feel unwelcome in a place that should have honored her presence." Sarah watched this interaction with a mixture of amazement and vindication. For the first time all evening, she felt like someone was truly standing up for her dignity and worth as a human being. David wasn't just using his power and influence, he was using them to fight against the exact kind of prejudice and discrimination that had caused her so much pain. The general manager assured David that the staff members responsible would face disciplinary action and that new training protocols would be implemented immediately. The maitre d' offered a stammering apology to Sarah, but she could see that his regret was motivated more by fear for his job than by genuine remorse for his actions. "I appreciate the apologies," Sarah said with quiet strength, "but what I really want is for you to understand that every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of what they're wearing or what kind of car they drove here in. Kindness shouldn't be reserved only for people who can afford expensive clothes." David smiled proudly at his wife's response. "That's exactly right. True hospitality means making every guest feel valued and welcome, not just the ones who fit a certain image or economic profile." As word of David's identity spread through the hotel, the entire atmosphere began to change. Staff members who had ignored or dismissed Sarah earlier were now approaching with genuine apologies and offers of assistance. The transformation was remarkable, though Sarah found it somewhat sad that people's behavior changed so dramatically, based solely on her connection to wealth and power. Emma appeared in the lobby, having apparently been informed about the commotion. She looked stunning in her elaborate wedding dress, but her face showed confusion and concern as she approached Sarah and David. "Sarah, I heard there was some kind of misunderstanding about your seating arrangement. I'm so sorry if there was any confusion." Sarah looked at her former friend with a mixture of sadness and clarity. "There was no misunderstanding, Emma. You knew exactly what was happening. And you allowed it to continue because you were embarrassed by my presence at your elegant wedding. You chose to protect your new social status rather than stand up for someone who has been your friend for over 20 years. Emma's face flushed with guilt and embarrassment. "Sarah, that's not true. I never meant for you to be hurt. It's just that Richard's family has certain expectations, and I thought it would be easier if you were seated somewhere quieter where you'd be more comfortable." "More comfortable for whom?" Sarah asked pointedly. "More comfortable for me to be hidden away where your new in-laws wouldn't have to see me? Or more comfortable for you to pretend that you don't have friends who don't fit into your new world?" David stepped forward, extending his hand to Emma with polite formality. "I'm David Chen, Sarah's husband. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but I think it's important for you to understand the impact of what happened here tonight. Sarah was treated as less than human because she doesn't fit someone's narrow definition of what a wedding guest should look like." Emma shook David's hand, but her expression showed that she still didn't fully grasp the severity of what had occurred. "I really didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted everything to be perfect for my wedding day." "Perfect for whom?" Sarah asked again. "Perfect for you, or perfect for people whose approval you think you need? Because from where I'm standing, treating a lifelong friend with such cruelty doesn't seem perfect at all. It seems like you've lost sight of what really matters in life." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Richard, Emma's new husband, along with several members of his wealthy family. They approached the group with curious expressions, clearly wondering what was causing such a commotion in the hotel lobby. Richard was a tall, distinguished man in his 40s who carried himself with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to privilege. "Is everything all right here?" Richard asked, his tone suggesting mild annoyance at the disruption to his wedding celebration. "Some of our guests mentioned there was some kind of incident involving the seating arrangements." David introduced himself to Richard and briefly explained what had happened to Sarah. As he spoke, Richard's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable, and several family members exchanged meaningful glances that suggested they were well aware of the discrimination that had taken place. "I see," Richard said carefully when David finished speaking. "Well, I certainly hope this can all be resolved quickly and quietly. We wouldn't want any unpleasantness to overshadow what should be a joyful celebration." Sarah felt a flash of anger at Richard's response, which seemed more concerned with avoiding embarrassment than with addressing the injustice that had occurred. "Unpleasantness," she repeated. "Is that what you call treating someone like they're not worthy to share the same air as your other guests?" Richard's mother, an elegant woman in her 60s wearing what appeared to be a fortune in jewelry, stepped forward with a condescending smile. "My dear, I'm sure this was all just a simple misunderstanding. Sometimes people feel more comfortable dining with others who share similar backgrounds." There's nothing wrong with that. The casual dismissal of Sarah's humanity was breathtaking in its cruelty, and Sarah felt David tense beside her. But before he could respond, Sarah found her own voice, stronger and clearer than she had ever heard it before. "You're absolutely right," Sarah said, looking directly at Richard's mother. "People should feel comfortable dining with others who share similar backgrounds. People who value kindness, integrity, and treating others with respect regardless of their bank account balance. People who understand that a person's worth isn't determined by their jewelry or their clothing, but by their character and their actions." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.